Hi, everybody, and welcome to Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone, and the topic for this stream is Biden, LNG, that is liquid natural gas, and climate disaster. So, let us turn to hello, Kay, turning to you. And Mark, hi Mark, I see you're on YouTube now. Okay. And I'm not sure who the third person is, but it's probably Dolores Pierce. Most probably. Okay, I'm going to share a piece that brought up this issue in the first place. This turns out to be a very important issue. This appeared in Common Dreams some time ago. I've been meaning to hit it, but I've had so many things to bring up that it hasn't been possible until now. Biden's LNG export goal, quote, would spell climate disaster, unquote. And that's a warning by an analysis done by Food and Water Watch. The author of this piece is Julia Conley from Common Dreams, one of their permanent staff. October 26th, 2022 is when it's dated. As the UN released its latest report showing that the continued failure of wealthy countries to immediately transition away from fossil fuels will cause catastrophic global heating. A new analysis warned the White House to scrap its plans to export billions of cubic meters of fracked gas to Europe annually until 2030. The proposal, which the Biden administration claims is consistent with our shared net zero goals, unquote, would generate fossil fuel emissions equivalent to 400 million metric tons of carbon each year, according to the analysis by Food and Water Watch, which warned the plan, quote, would spell climate disaster, unquote. One year of emissions from 50 billion cubic meters of liquefied natural gas would be equivalent to yearly emissions from 100 coal plants, reads the group's report titled LNG, the U.S. and EU's Deal for Disaster. So liquid natural gas is created by cooling fracked gas to create a clear, colorless the liquid has been touted by the oil industry as, quote, the climate-friendly alternative to Russian gas, but problems arise quickly as a standard methane liquid leakage rate from U.S. source LNG has not been measured, unquote. Food and Water Watch adds. The U.S. is already the world's biggest exporter of LNG, with exports averaging 0.32 BCM per day. Okay, BCM is billion cubic meters again. Averaging 0.32 billion cubic meters per day in the first half of this year. More than 70% of U.S. exports went to Europe this year, and while the Biden administration plan has promised an extra 15 billion cubic meters of LNG to Europe this year, the current pace, quote, will triple, unquote, that pledge, according to the report. Quote, the White House vision for delivering gas to Europe will serve to deliver climate chaos across the globe at a moment when we simply cannot build new fossil fuel facilities at all, unquote, said Food and Water Watch Research Director Amanda Starbuck. Quote, the White House must work with political leaders across the globe to find a safer alternative than doubling down on dirty gas, unquote. The UN report released Wednesday estimated that planetary heating could reach 2.9 degrees Celsius by the end of the century if policymakers do not shift away from fossil fuel extraction promptly, a level of heating which could threaten hundreds of millions of people with sea level rise. More than that, I think. Food and Water Watch also detailed the immediate harm the Biden administration will be doing to communities near fracking sites in the United States. I hope you're watching, Pennsylvania, if it moves ahead with the LNG exports plan. Quote, communities plagued by fracking experience well documented and severe environmental impacts which fall disproportionately on frontline populations that include rural, low-income communities and communities of color, unquote. The group report reads, quote again, those living near fracking sites are at increased risk of contracting cancer and a host of other medical disorders, with pregnant women and children at even greater risk. The analysis also notes that exporting 50 billion cubic meters of LNG per year would cost between 10 billion and 19 billion annually, while providing the EU with just 12% of its demand for gas as it faces an energy crisis. Meanwhile, the same level of investment in utility scale solar power could provide Europe with more than 540 megawatt hours, which is 11% more energy than would be provided by liquid natural gas. Quote, onshore wind power costs are similar, providing 515 million megawatts per hour, reads the report. Scaling up renewables to this level would avoid over 500 million metric tons of fossil fuels, no matter if it is replaced with solar or wind. The choice is clear. How much clearer can it be, folks? How much clearer can it be? It makes no sense to do the LNG. Joe Biden has a bias towards fossil fuels. That's what it amounts to. He's been talking to the LNG producers. He hasn't been talking to the renewable producers. That's what this amounts to. He's an old man. He's behind the times. He doesn't think well anymore. He doesn't he doesn't consider different alternatives. He is largely ignorant. He needs to change. He needs to work harder. He needs to look to different voices, not just in this area, but in lots of other areas too. By 2024, with programs like this and with the foreign policy he's been following, he's going to be a sitting duck for whoever the Republicans want to run for president. Whether it's Donald Trump, whether it's Ron DeSantis, I don't care who it is. With the kinds of policies he's following in many, many areas, he's going to be a sitting duck. His democracy resistance has been totally inadequate. He failed to deliver very much for the people in the first 2 years. That is why the Republicans are as popular as they are now. That is why this coming election is so close. That is why the Republicans have a chance to win in both houses. And that is why year 3 and year 4 of the Biden administration is likely to be a total disaster. Because unless he has both houses of Congress, he not only won't be able to do anything because he's so incompetent, but he also won't be able to do anything because the Republicans will be doing all they can to make sure he accomplishes nothing, even if they win only one house, of Congress. So is it all hopeless? No, it's not all hopeless. There's something we can all do in this coming election, right now, over the next 10 days. We could make a decision to vote against all of the people who have been taking big money from corporations, from party committees, from wealthy individuals, from PACs, plus who have been getting support of a monetary nature from the super PACs. If we vote for the candidate that has gotten the least amount of money from all these sources, and we systematically do that across the whole spectrum, if everybody who votes follows that decision rule, we will change the Congress radically, and we will loosen the hold of toxic money on the Congress. And even on the executive too, because when the executive sees people voting that way, the executive will realize that if they take that kind of money, it will be toxic to them as well. So let's get going on this, people. Empowering democracy in the first instance means voting for the people who take or who get and support the least amount of big money from the sources that I named. We'll be talking about this a lot more this week in one way or another. I'll check out your comments now. So, Kay Ryan says, hi, Joe. Mark Harlan says, hello again, Joe. Kay Ryan says, Hi, Mark. But I'm glad to meet you. CC Swift says on lunch break. Hi, Professor. Well, thanks for calling me a professor, CC Swift. At one time in my life, I was a professor, but I haven't been one for a very long time now. It's just hard to get the professor out of the boy, I guess. Mark Collins says there are some investment opportunities where the hedge fund managers share as much as the military industrial complex and the general investor of both, while there are some policies that favor one category over the other. That's absolutely true, Mark. Absolutely true. It is where the two differ that the public can present public option ideas. Okay? In other words, where their interests are working against each other, is where the public can slip in and bring in some public option ideas. It is in our interest to be critical of both, okay, as monopolistic entities within each industry. Absolutely. Not only in just those two industries, but in the case of all monopolistic entities, okay, uh, within other industries, okay, as well. We have to watch the monopolies very carefully. We have to watch not only their economic behavior, we have to watch their political behavior because they're very active in the super PAC and the PAC area and the corporate donation areas. Mark Collins says, hello, Kay. And CC Swift says, well, you teach like a professor, says CC Swift. I love your stuff. Thank you, CC. I certainly appreciate that. Okay, folks, if you have any more questions, then please let me have them and I will consider them. If not, then please remember that I have a Patreon account at patreon.com/Joe_Firestone and a Buy Me a Coffee account at buymeacoffee.com/Joe.Firestone. I'd appreciate it if you visit those occasionally. Also, I want to remind you I have another stream that's coming up at 9 p.m. tonight. Lessons from Brazil is going to be the title for that particular stream, of course, with empowering democracy in front of it, because there are a lot of lessons to be learned from what was done in Brazil to restrict Jair Bolsonaro to a single term instead of to two terms. Of course, that assumes he's not able to implement a coup in the 2 months that remain until it's possible for Lula to take over the presidential palace there. So thank you all for coming. And thank you, Mark, for coming again. I hope to see a lot more of you. You're always one of my favorite people. And CC Swift, I'm so glad to see you coming back as well. And of course, also Kay. Thank you very much, Kay, for being here and for sharing. If there are no more questions, I'm going to end now. And hopefully I'll see you all at 9 p.m. tonight.